Hey, you're listening to the Top 8 podcast. I'm your host, Matt Batiste, joined by my friends.
Your other co-host, TJ here, and our good friend, Tom, the vocalist of Patient 67. Thanks for coming on, Tom.
So welcome, TJ, Matt. Great to be here.
It's great to have a guest on here and do things a little bit differently this time around. Tom, we're going to be talking to Tom about some of the most influential things to bands, albums, towards him as a vocalist and as a band with Patient 67, which is really exciting because normally we kind of make this show about us, and I love making it about the audience and our guests and other people. So really happy to have Tom here today.
Yeah, it's a very cool full circle moment for me too. The very first band interview I ever did when I joined Scene Daddy was with Tom in 2020, talking about their EP Home Truths. So it's kind of a full circle moment to come back 4 years later and talk about this next release that they have coming up too, which is super cool.
I'm so excited to be here. Like you said, TJ, it's so cool to have worked with, obviously so much, so closely with Scene Daddy over the years has been awesome. And to get the chance to talk about some albums that were and bands that were influential to me, sort of growing up listening to the music that I now play today. So yeah, it's really exciting and great to be a part of a podcast episode with you boys.
So typically how this works is we'll kind of go through our list from 8 and work our way up to 1. But because this is about Patient 67 and about Tom, TJ and I will not be giving any lists this time. We're going to run through Tom's list. So Tom, why don't you start us off with number 8?
Okay, fantastic. I've tried to, I wouldn't say I've done a fully fledged order, but I'll go from probably ones that aren't my definitive like pantheon. But the first album from a band that influenced me, as wanting to be in a metalcore band, wanting to do vocals in a metalcore band. It's actually the debut album from a band called The Plot Anew. Now, I know a lot of you guys listening know about The Plot Anew. I want to say they've had an incredible career and quite, someone who's followed that band since really the very early days, seeing their rise, particularly in the last 3 to 4 years, has been incredible to watch. But their first album, I think it's called Father's Seed, Firstborn is the name of the album. Father's Seed is is the first song on that album where the person on the phone who finds out that he has a son, and that just drops into the most the filthiest breakdown, for no reason really whatsoever. But that album is just so angry, so heavy, so aggressive, and that was definitely one of the first albums that was just straight breakdown after breakdown, some singing in there, and it really shows Landon in his element as a heavy vocalist. Obviously, before they found the sound that makes them so well known today, but
I say their transition from their early stuff to their current stuff is crazy how far Landon has come as a vocalist. I say even now to this day that I think he's one of the most dynamic vocalists in this entire scene. Even just his side projects, he does some acoustic instrumental stuff with Roy Rodriguez and stuff that he's put out, and then also the side projects with AI 640, super crazy heavy. He's just so dynamic.
100%, and that's exactly early on you can sort of see that influence more in sort of the metalcore, hardcore sort of roots of the band. And yeah, definitely. When I was 10, 12 years ago, I was listening to that going, man, this is the hardest shit ever. So yeah, it definitely has to be up there for me.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting this one. I made a little list in my head of what I thought you were going to say. Didn't think you were going to say Plot Anew, but that is a great pick.
Why don't we get to number 7 then?
Okay, number 7, I've gone with, so it's a band, it's kind of funny, you mentioned TJ about full circle moments, and one of my full circle moments as a vocalist and someone in a band is being able to work with bands that I've listened to, coming up, within, being someone going to shows, listening to metalcore, post-hardcore, stuff like that. It's the debut album from a band called Outline and Colour, Jury of Wolves. Nice. Outline and Colour are criminally underrated. I think that album, really, the Jury of Wolves album is just insane with how it blends elements of electronics. You've got the awesome high-pitched vocals, which they do really tastefully in my opinion, and the vocalist at the time, Trevor, on screams, just delivering just these brutal lines. electronics. It ticks all the boxes for me, and it's an album I still come back to this day. And we've been lucky enough to collab with them on a cover we did a few years ago.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah.
A couple of years ago, but even before I was even in Patient 67, some of like the nicest dudes, like to me, just in the way they always gave their time, showed me that like people in bands can be very like social and give time back to the people who listen to them. But yeah, that album absolutely rips. If you haven't heard it in a minute, boys, would 100% recommend it. It's a great listen even today.
Yeah, I think I've only listened through it once or twice, but I will say you're 100% correct, and Outline and Color is criminally underrated. I feel like they're on kind of the precipice of blowing up, similar to you guys. You guys are in like kind of similar stages of your career, I would say, where you're just right there and have the opportunity to just like hit that next level of mainstream attention.
We were supposed to do some shows with them with the Blue Ridge thing. We don't need to re-unpack that kettle of fish, right. But we were supposed to do some shows with them at that time, and it's a shame it fell through. But I've always said to them, if they ever want to come back and visit Australia again, we'd be more than happy to help make that happen. Maybe in the future we can rip some shows together. That'd be sick.
Amazing.
I've never heard of them, but I'm happy to hear that at least they were treating you well in the scene, because I feel like that is so important to sort of grow the scene and help out other bands and help people out. Like that just makes you like a band even more. Like it definitely makes it a lot easier to like a band when you know that they're good people.
100%, Matt. I think the coolest thing about that band is that, like TJ, you said correctly, Dave, they are underrated, but they still continually, I can see like the amount of love and effort and energy they put into their music. And I think they're on Thriller Records now. I think that their next release is going to really elevate them to that next level, and I can't wait to see it. So
yeah, I hope so.
Absolutely. And what would be your sixth pick?
My sixth pick. I'd be shocked if you guys didn't know this album, but it's Suicide Season by Bring Me the Horizon.
Who's that again?
Yeah, look, they're a small. I think they're a MySpace deathcore band. No, they
the good old days.
Absolutely. I mean that we all have those. Everyone's discovered Bring Me the Horizon in different ways in different phases. Their career is just. I mean, you could do like a 30 for 30 on that. What they've been able to do as a band, but second album, second full length album they did, really was like their, first venture into like more of your classic metalcore sound. They sort of ventured away from the deathcore and like, more, deathcore sound they had on the first album. And I love that. Like it's coming up through high school and listening to Chelsea Smile, just with the ridiculous breakdowns and the bass drops, and something about Ollie's like screams not being too, like they were just so raw and full. And yeah, I loved it. And it's still an album that holds up well today. I think if they were to, I know they do play some older songs from time to time, but I reckon those songs would still go off live at some of the biggest shows.
Great album. Toured with Fall Out Boy recently, and I think one of my favorite things about that, I didn't get a chance to go to that tour. I was really upset, but I loved scrolling through Instagram of all of the people that I know that listen primarily to pop music, and they went because, Fall Out Boy sort of crosses over with a lot of the pop crowd. And so all of the people that I knew going there, liking the pop stuff, going for Fall Out Boy, that had absolutely no idea who Bring Me was. And they ended up going to that concert and watching all of their Insta stories whenever Bring Me would play their old songs, going, what the heck is this? It was like, they're like, the devil is opening for Fall Out Boy. And it was just, it was the funniest thing watching that go down on my Insta stories. Cause like you had the two sides of it, the people that I follow that like early Bring Me and like the heavier stuff that were there. And then the people that were just there for Fall Out Boy. And, they kind of cross over with the Justin Bieber crowd, right? So it's like there's a lot of crossover with sure. Both those types of bands. Fall Out Boy does really well on pop radio now, so they bring out that pop crowd that may not necessarily know about Bring Me. So seeing the screaming on Insta stories and people's captions of what the heck is this was just so amusing to me.
Yeah, it's crazy, and I think they're a band that's just. They could, and they can really wear so many different hats. So yeah, I think for people who discovered them, on their, as they were sort of finding their feet and finding their sound. This is even before they released the third album, which they've sort of grown with each release, haven't they? Really leading up to That's the Spirit. They've just really it was exponential. But that album is one that's such a fun listen. And I think that energy of that album with like I said, the more traditional metalcore sound is just a great listen. I think a lot of people probably discovered the genre because of that album, at least when it comes to people within the scene looking for something a little bit heavier, maybe a gateway album for some people as well.
Bring Me's also one of those bands where they can have their own eras tour.
I did see that post the other day too, and they definitely should. Like, I would love to see them go and do like 3 or 4 songs from every single record. Just be like, look at where we started and look at where we are now. Like, even I'll have friends at work that do not listen to heavy music, and I'm like, yeah, you want to see the craziest transition? Let me show you Pray for Plagues and then Medicine. Like, it's just insane. He was one of the, like, Ollie's vocals were kind of like a more aggressive version of Chester Bennington from Linkin Park, which is where I think I really loved Bring Me the Horizon, because it was that sing scream kind of scream that like you can still understand, but it has so much aggression to it. Yeah. Ollie's an iconic vocalist for sure.
Yeah.
I can kind of see that.
Yeah.
But on that topic now, let's move along the list, because I'm curious to hear what you have to say next and who you're going to bring up next.
So I've got there's a couple to come that are, I think, underrated. TJ, you may know them, but there's a band by the name of Jamie's Elsewhere. They are, and I don't know, iconic's too strong. They should have been iconic. Their album, They Said a Storm Was Coming, is an incredible listen. Everyone I speak to who knows that album raves and raves about it. And at some point, we all were listening to this album. Everyone who brings up Jamie's Elsewhere, have you heard They Said a Storm Was Coming? Yeah, well, that album rips. But it just didn't take. And that album to this day, even though it's an underrated gem from like 2010, I still think, it influenced me incredibly, just because Aaron Pauley, who was a vocalist of that band at the time, and I believe they reformed and did an EP last year, but he went on Two of Mice and Men. So I think that sort of led to how that band sort of dissolved at the time. I don't know that for sure, but all I know is that they made this incredible. It's probably correct, right? Because he joins this huge band at the time in Of Mice and Men. But They Said a Storm Was Coming is still so good today. Like, you've got the insane range of Aaron on vocals. The breakdowns are just absolutely nuts. Cameron Mizell's on production, who did so many of those albums at the time, like Woe Was Me, Numbers, and Sleeping with Sirens debut, and it's just got all the elements of a great metalcore, post-hardcore album for me. So, Matt, I'm not sure if you've heard it. If you haven't, I think you'd really like it. Like, it's
I'm
really
check it out after this.
It's got a beauty. It's nostalgic, but it still feels fresh in a lot of ways. It's hard to explain, but a unique album.
It's like pinnacle 2010s Risecore is like how I classify it. It's like that perfect Risecore type album.
As long as it sort of still has, like, here's the thing. Here's how you know it's a great album, right? Because it's like, an album could be good for you because you remember listening to it in 2010, let's say. So you got that nostalgia. And I feel like nostalgia sort of like puts those rose tinted glasses on for a lot of us, because there's some really bad songs that, I could still hear and be like, oh yeah, this song, even though while it's bad, or, most people today would listen to it and be like, it's bad, it reminds me of a time in my life that I really enjoyed or I want to remember. So, the nostalgia tinted glasses kind of change things. But if it still holds up and, people are getting into it now and going back and listening to it, that's how an album really stands out. And from the way that you guys are kind of talking about it, it sounds like this album, you can introduce a new person to it and it would be good. But also there's like the nostalgia sound, right? Like going for that old sound. So I'm really excited to go and listen to it after we finish up here, and I'll let you know what my thoughts are afterwards, because that's how you really know like something stands the test of time, right?
I think you can tell it really holds up too, because people were asking for that band to come back, and you don't do that unless that one album they have is iconic.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know that they had plans to do like reunion shows for it, but obviously 2010 leads into 2020 and the pandemic shut that down. They did come back and do an EP. I think it came out last year. It's not the same sort of sound, but it's still cool to see the band, still doing things because of the love that people had for that album at the time. I think some albums just take, and people, even though they might not necessarily have the commercial success, they have like a cult following.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what that album has. And I I will still go back and jam it today. So yeah, it holds up.
Sometimes
Amazing.
those cult followings are worth more than the commercial success. You know, they can release anything, do anything, and people will follow you through thick and thin.
Absolutely.
So we are on number 5
4, I think.
Or 4.
Number 4. I feel like I'm just taking you guys through my favorite underrated metalcore bands, but these,
I love it.
Hey, that works too.
This is, I mean, I think it's hopefully some different stuff when it comes to talking about some of these bands. But the band that I have at number 4 is a band by the name of Secrets, and they have an album called Fragile Figures. Now, this album, I believe it was 10 years old last year, but as I was thinking about starting my own band, this was an album that really I would listen to over and over as sort of like a band that I would love to sound like. Secrets were Rise Records band. I feel like it's a bit of a buzzword today. But they had a awesome like first album, but you could tell they were still sort of finding their feet. And on the second album, I think they changed the screaming vocalist. And it's just such a great record. I think Tom Denny from A Day to Remember, I wasn't sure if he was in the band at the time when he produced it, but he produced that album, and it's got the insane like poppy polish of like a Day to Remember album with the huge choruses. But
Sleep
again,
Well, Darling reminds me so much of If It Means a Lot to You. It's that like, if I'm thinking of the right song, it's that transition from acoustic into like the full band performance.
100%. And it's got all the, and that leads perfectly into what I was going to say. It's got the accessibility in parts of like a great, like, you know, post-hardcore metalcore record with even like some acoustic moments and stuff as well, but it's also got those passive-aggressive breakdown call-outs, ridiculous, like, you know, just chugs galore. And it's an album that, again, they did tour it for their anniversary. I think it had a huge impact on people and really brought that band up to the next level. And again, it's a great listen today. The vocalist who was screaming on that album, I believe his name was Aaron. He passed away a few years ago now, and it's obviously that's such a shame, but his performance on this album is legendary. Such a great vocalist and a great album.
Yeah, I usually, when I go back and listen to Secrets, it's not that often. I think they are very underrated. Like, they're not one of those bands you think of when you think of that genre of music right away, but they were always there. I really loved their self-titled 2018, and then the album they did in 2022 was so good too. The Collapse. Yeah, loved it.
Great album. Absolutely.
All right, Tom, who is the next band on Tom's list of underrated bands?
So we're in the top 3.
We're the top 3 now.
They're not underrated to me, but I think people hearing that will go, I'm hoping some people listening go, I haven't heard that band in a while. For me, number 3 is the debut album from We Came as Romans, To Plant a Seed.
Nice.
That album is, again, another one that to me feels like it was – this one probably isn't as underrated. I feel like this one did really take at the time, and I think people still will refer back to this one as one of the better like debut albums from a metalcore band. It's got that insane Joey Sturgis production. I feel like it was ahead of its time in the way it sort of brought in like orchestral elements. Obviously, Kyle on that album, again, a vocalist who's rest in peace, Kyle. Yeah, he was incredible on that album, and Dave screaming. So, yeah, insane record.
I do. Whenever I think of like that 2009 metalcore era, like the With Roots Above and Branches Below, it's like To Plant a Seed is also right there. Like this album was huge.
It was huge. This is definitely one that I think blew this band up, and rightfully so. We jammed it on in like the full. We had a long drive on our last tour last month, and like we were all just picking albums and going through them. And this was one that I picked and put on, and I was like, damn, this record's still. Today it does hold up really, really well. I didn't see them like at the time of them touring this, obviously in Australia, but I did see them play a couple of songs off it like back in like 2012, 13. And I was just like, man, this band is so sick. And it's so cool to see them still killing it today. It's awesome.
Yeah, that's one of those records that's like nostalgic for me too, because I remember sort of like tail end of high school and that one coming out, but I also haven't spun it in a while either. So I can't speak to how well it would stand out or stand up. But I think there's a lot of albums after Tom's list that we got to go through and listen to again if it's been a while. TJ, have you listened to this album in a while?
I haven't listened to it in a while. I feel like my main way that I'm listening to music is I'll make playlists for like tours that I'm going to see. And I know that, well, I'm pretty sure that they did like an anniversary tour for this record a little while ago, and then they were like, we're not playing any more songs off this from now on. So I haven't listened to it in a while, but I definitely
that's a way to get people out to your concert, by the way. It's like, by the way, we're never going to play these songs ever again. It's like, oh, okay, so I have to go. And then on the next tour, it's like, psych, we'll still play this one.
If it was anywhere near me and they said that, I would have definitely been there. It would have dramatically increased the odds of me going. And I think I think it's an album that for some people would have been a real gateway record in terms of getting people, into that like sort of heavier sound. So I have to put it on the list for sure.
They definitely kill to this day too.
Before we move into your top two, TJ brought up something interesting about the way that he makes his playlists, by picking out artists that he's going to see and going around there. How do you typically make your playlists?
I think I'm similar to TJ. If I'm going to a show like I know that's coming up, I'll definitely go and whether it's, I try not to look at the set list, but I will make my own playlist of stuff I think they're going to play.
I have to know.
Yeah, I'm a set list looker too.
I got to admit, it is, especially if it's a band with a larger catalog, it is good to know like what's going to be like played for sure.
It also it sort of gets the jump on any disappointments that they're not going to play your favorite song. If they're not going to play it, it's like you don't leave there disappointed. You go in there with the expectation that they're not going to play that song that you really want to hear. If there is one like that, hopefully they do play your favorite song depending on who you're seeing. But yeah,
cool.
It's a double-edged sword because it can ruin some things too. Like when I went to see Bring Me in like 2021 or something like that. I can't remember. They were doing this deathcore medley in the middle of their set where they were like mixing in some of their older stuff into like a 5-track medley. And I was like, oh my God, I have to see this now. But I was like, if I had been surprised by that, I feel like it just would have been even more exciting, but like I was so excited going into it. So I don't know.
It's risk reward ratio there.
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
Being from Perth, like we're often the first show on a lot of tours, like, and obviously doing Australian runs, they'll generally change their set at least a little bit. So I feel like a lot of the time we do go in blind. I think it was, we saw Escape the Fate last year and Drugs were opening and they did like Craig was obviously fronting the band and he did like a Chiodo's Melody medley.
Oh, nice.
And like it was taking me like we were sitting there like standing there listening and we heard the start of some of the songs and I was like, damn, this is like really familiar. And I was like, wait, what the fuck is going on? This is so cool that they did that. And again, like that's the sort of, you're right, Matt. Like it's, had I known that was coming, I don't think it would have been as cool as being like, holy shit. You know what I mean? So there's that element too.
Yeah, it's going to concerts is fun that way. I mostly wanted to bring up the playlist thing though, because I'll do that for the odd concert, but those aren't the main playlists that I listen to. Like I'll do one for the concert, and then once that concert's over, I'll almost never listen to that playlist again. But between concerts, I'll just sort of like make playlists based on mood. If I'm in a throwback mood, I've got my throwback 2000s. Emo pop punk playlist. If I'm in a heavier mood, I've got my playlist called Arf Arf, which is, and like that one's one of my favorite ones just because you have to name it Arf Arf. But, and then, I've got like my Midwest emo stuff and all of the things. So it's just newer emo, up and coming bands. Like I've just got all these different playlists for the vibes.
Absolutely. It's a way to do it. You need one for every occasion.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like I'm making playlists based off of vibes here. And then give them ridiculously long Fall Out Boy style names.
Have to.
Which you recently released a song with a long Fall Out Boy style name. How have your recent releases been going?
I'm really happy to be consistently releasing music. The last few songs have been really good. No Place was the one from in January. That's doing quite well. It's always nice to go to like our Spotify and see like, something at the top that's not like one of our covers or whatever. That just always seems to sit at the top. But it's cool to see people connecting with the songs. And gets me excited to continue to release more music. So yeah, we did. We had to do a longer song title. I've always wanted to do something like that. It's been cool. Really, really good.
Yeah, I know that while we're talking about longer song titles, you did mention No Place. I honestly think that's the best Patient 67 song. So if you're listening and you haven't heard of Tom or Patient 67, go listen to No Place. I feel like that's a great starting point for the band.
It is great. How was working with Aaron, by the way? I have to ask about that.
I think it's like he was really good, like very professional. You can tell that this man has been, at the top of his game for a long time.
For those who don't know, Aaron Gillespie from the drummer and vocalist for Under Oath.
Yeah, he was great. Like, it was just a matter of saying, like, here's the song, here's what we were thinking. He wrote his own part, which was really cool. Like, brought his own sort of flair. We didn't have to. I was like, mate, I'm not going to tell you like what to do. You just do your thing. And it was cool. We had the bridge there, and we were like, wouldn't it be cool if we like got someone on it that we all love, like, as a musician. And he came to mind, and luckily he had the time to do it, so it worked out well.
Yeah, how did you secure that?
So pretty much I just DM'd him on Instagram. I was like, hey, Aaron, we have a song that I really like. I think you'd be a great fit for it. He's like, yeah, and he's like, oh, he texted to me, and I texted him the song, and he was like, this sounds great. I'd love to do it. And it really was just from there. So, we wanted to even get into doing a music video, but, as you guys probably know nowadays, doing music videos is logistically tricky, just in terms of like budget allotment when you're putting a release together. But in the future, but yeah, really, really glad. Definitely a bucket list to have someone like Aaron on one of our songs.
Okay, now that we're on questions, though, I do have to ask now. My favorite Patient 67 song is Fatebringer, because I love Brian from Currents. Well, obviously you guys, but like the feature is so good. But I have to ask, between Brian, Kellen Quinn, and Aaron, who was your like most sought after like collab to do?
So I think the thing with the collabs is, and we've spoken about this in different conversations together, fellas, but being in Perth, we don't have probably the same opportunities to tour. So part of being able to collab with great people is it's a way to sort of network and connect with and get exposed to other like people who might like our music because of the features. And that's why we're sort of always looking for, people who might be a good fit. In terms of my favorite out of those three, I think there was also very different. Kellen's been someone who's worked with our band for even pre-Home Truths. Like when we released Help Inflicted back in 2019, he helped us push that song. Like he was running like an agency at the time, just like to help up and coming bands. And we were lucky enough to work with him. He wrote lyrics for us and with us on Home Truths. So it was kind of full circle to get him on one of the songs, and then on Feel Alive as well. Brian was just so cool to work with. That was a part that was all tracked by me, and he just had to kind of plug and play his part. So he was, and I was like, you can do what I just did, but better. And sure enough, that's what he did. So that worked out really well. So I don't think I have a favorite. It's just more like different experiences and different songs. I think the one thing I would like to do in the future is be able to make that happen in person. Again, we're so far away from everyone. But I saw a video, I think it was of Caleb from Beartooth going in and doing some stuff with Rory from Dayseeker. And it was all done
like acoustic album.
Exactly. And they brought him into the studio and he came in and nailed his part. And that was cool. And like, obviously doing stuff over text and Instagram is cool, but I think I would love to just experience that, like, doing that in the studio with like another musician, like outside of the Patient 67 bubble. Like that would be really cool.
I feel like you guys got to plan like a whole like 3 to 6 months in the States where you're just like recording, touring, getting all of the bucket list things out of the way.
Doing meet and greets with other people too, and just doing everything.
I think
Make sure
it's
you
the
come
same
to Toronto so you can see us.
Man, I love Toronto so much. I've been once before. I'd love to. Yeah, we've always talked about coming back, but that would be the way to do it. I think. Yeah, you set up shop there. I mean, we work closely with Andrew Wetzel from Attack. His label Oxide do distro for us. Like he puts out stuff out for us. He's been amazing, and he's got obviously some great connections. So anything can happen in the future.
Definitely.
All right. Well, let's get into number 2 and to see where we're at as we get closer to number 1. I want to know who number 1 is.
Okay, so number 2, I think this is a band that again, I think for a time they were definitely one of the bigger metalcore bands in like the smaller sort of scene, but it's the Color Morale, number 2 for me, and their second full length album, My Devil in Your Eyes, and that album is one of my favorites because it just, for me, was the first time I'd ever heard like a really, really soulful voice in metalcore. Garrett Rapp, the vocalist in that band. He is such an incredible singer, and he screams in that album too. Like I think after that album he stopped using his like false chord stuff as much. I think probably because it was hard for him to do that and sing like he does. I don't know. I've never heard anyone be able to do that. But that album is just so sick. It's another Joey Sturgis one. I had that on repeat for what felt like a whole year. And it's just it's no frills. Like it's not anything like over the top with electronics or anything like that. It's just straight sick riffs, like crazy breakdowns, and just like I said, those amazing vocals that tie it together. So
Yeah.
I think it's an underrated record. It was the next one that they put out, No Hope, that really blew up. I think they had so much hype behind them, and then they put out No Hope, I think 2 years later, and I think it landed on the Billboard chart somewhere. But yeah,
Amazing.
I think they had a really good run. I think they're back now doing some. I know they did some return shows, and I think that's really great.
They were supposed to have a reunion, I think, at like Blue Ridge or something. I don't know if that actually happened, but I know that they were like kind of reforming. So
I think that I don't think they ended up playing their set, but they have played shows since then, I believe.
Okay.
And I'm hoping to hear new music from them because I think they had a really they had something special with that band. So it's my number
Definitely.
2.
Cool. What do we got at number 1? I feel like I know what number 1 is going to be.
Sure, TJ, can you guess for me? I want you to try.
When I was making my list of bands that influenced Tom, I was like, Sleeping with Sirens has to be number 1.
Oh man, I wish it's not quite. Only because I can't. That's a great pick, by the way, and that it wasn't my honorable mentions. But I think I like. I as much as I'd love to pretend that I could sing like Kellen, I'm many semitones off. But my number 1 album has to be "Stand Up and Scream" from Asking Alexandria. That's
okay. Great pick.
That album. So obviously there's the version where I talk about what it sounds like in 2024, and then there's the version that sounds like, you know, what that album was like when it came out at the time. And that is just an album that, again, it was a gateway album for me. You know, the way that, I mean, I thought it was the heaviest shit I've ever heard when I was in high school. And even to this day, there's some heavy moments on that album. It's got the perfect right amount of like, you know, on the nose. I don't want to say cringe. Cringe is too strong a word, but perfect amount of just like lyrics that make you go, oh,
it's
okay.
Self-aware.
Yeah. I think they know what they're doing with the whole like, party lifestyle type thing they've got going. But the songs are so sick. There's a song on there for all like sort of occasions, I feel like. And I know the follow-up for a lot of people, Reckless and Relentless is the better, probably rounded album. But Stand Up and Scream is just a perfect right amount of 2010's metalcore. And I think it's an album I keep coming back to. Danny sounds insane on that album. And I mean, I'm talking about vocalists a lot, but that was one that I was like, dude, like, what are they? It's just sounded like magic. So yeah, even to this day, it's a top album for me, and I think it's a lot of metalcore fans at that time coming into the scene can agree it's a staple album of the genre.
Absolutely.
Are there any other artists or albums that you feel like you really struggled with because you wanted to add them to the list, but they didn't quite make the cut?
I think, yeah, Sleeping with Sirens for sure. Matt and TJ touched on them for sure. I think there's probably the more emo adjacent bands, like, yeah, bands that I was listening to probably before I got into like the sort of metalcore acts, like bands like Silverstein and sort of bands in that sort of more emo adjacent genre. They're really sick. I listened to a lot of Fall Out Boy as well. The first, I keep saying debut album. I'm not an elitist. It just happens to be the album where I stuck to. But it's Take This to Your Grave from Fall Out Boy was a really key album for me. Like way before, like even back when I was like early years of high school. So I should make a playlist and we can share it maybe. But there's so many to name. 8 is hard. I don't know how we did this with MySpace with actual people, let alone with
I know,
with
right?
albums. It's so hard.
Whenever we go to make a list, I'm like, damn, we only get 8. Can I have like 8 doubles? Like,
yeah,
and it's subjective too, because it's like how I feel now. Like looking back, you know, there was definitely times when you guys would know this is probably still the same now. You have an album of the week, an album of the month, you know, and then within 3 months you go, I haven't listened to that album in a while, and it's kind of how
there's just so much music. It's hard to like consume everything and appreciate everything as it needs to be appreciated. But you know, it's the stuff that sticks with you over time that you're like, okay, this is definitely more influential on me and has had this much of an impact. So.
It's also so easy to consume and find music now with Spotify. Everything's in the, you know, in your pocket. Whereas before, you needed to actually go out to the store, buy the album, rip it onto your computer, throw it onto iTunes, rip it on, burn a CD or rip it onto your iPod. All of those things that you had to do, those extra steps, or download on LimeWire or torrents or any of those things. Where it's like sometimes too, we would have different songs. Like we'd have like 3 or 4 songs from an artist on an iPod, but not a full album. Now it's like we have their whole discography, plus they're like live tree sessions and their our audio tree sessions and their YouTube stuff, and like everything is there at the tip of our fingers. It's almost overwhelming in a sense. So you get obsessed with one album for a while, then you move on to it, and then 3-4 months later you forget that you were so obsessed with that album because you've been obsessed with like 100 albums in between.
Pretty much, yeah.
So it's wild. It's insane. I don't know how we keep it to 8 on our lists either. Maybe we need to do a little HTML coding and make some of them 16. But we really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show today.
Oh, Matt and TJ, thank you for having me. It was really cool to go back and realize that some things don't actually change. I think all of these albums I've listened to at least once in the last 6 months at least. So I think, like you said, Matt, the albums that mean the most to you tend to stay with you over time and have a lot of replay value, and that's what's so cool about music, I think. So thanks for letting me come on and do this. It was really sick.
I think the coolest thing too is learning a little bit more about Tom and the bands that we listen to and hearing more from them and what influenced them, right? So once again, thank you so much for coming on the show, and
thank you.
Remember that if you did enjoy the show, to go and check out Tom's music. Please also, Patient 67, we'll put some links up in the description to their
new
Spotify
EP coming
page.
out April 5th. Pay attention to that. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any tour dates or anything coming up, Tom?
We'll have more to announce. Yes, we await for the green light, but we'll definitely have some more shows to be announced. And can't wait for the EP on April 5th. It's going to be cool.
So keep an eye on that. Tour dates, new EP, April 5th, and we'll put links in the description of this episode wherever you're watching or listening. And remember to subscribe, follow, like, share with all your friends. Those little things all help us immensely. So thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Top 8 Podcast.
We'll see you next week.